Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Bechet, and this is the AAF Exchange, a podcast from the American Action Forum, where experts provide clear, data-driven insights into today's economic and domestic policy issues. Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you for wearing green today. I mean, in honor of the Celtics win, I'm sure.
Yes. Very first thing that came to mind this morning is I randomly chose a tie that turned out to be green.
Yeah. It's I think it's your subconscious because you knew we were going to be hanging out a lot today. So, you know, you're just doing it to support me.
No, that would have been black.
We really are in the best time of year for sports, though, minus no football. We have the PGA.
Oh, no, the schedule just came out, so
the
we
schedule
have
just
football.
came out, so we even have football to talk about. So I mean,
Right, the Steelers open against the Jets, so they have a chance to go with a winning record briefly.
Yeah, and then you play the Patriots, so there goes your winning record.
No, they'll be a 1-1 by the time they get there. So,
all right, well, let's do the podcast, huh?
Who's your quarterback these days?
Oh, still Drake May.
Oh, wow,
Much better position than you guys.
We have lots of quarterbacks.
Yeah, you have lots of quarterbacks and no quarterbacks. I think I said that about the Cleveland Browns, but it might apply to you as well.
They have even more.
I think there's three teams that sort of applies to.
Yeah.
You guys, the Cleveland Browns, and the Saints, with Aaron Rodgers still out there.
I think the Steelers should pick up Carr. I mean, who cares if he's retired?
Kirk Cousins is also still available.
He's probably better than he's expensive.
All right, let's do the podcast.
Okay, podcast.
Welcome back to the AAF Exchange. On this episode, House committees mark up the reconciliation bill, and President Trump issues a new executive order on drug prices. Joining us to discuss all this is Douglas Holtz-Eakin and AAF's Director of Healthcare Policy, Michael Baker. Doug, thanks for joining us.
I love being on. Thanks.
Yeah. So before we jump into everything, what's been on your mind recently?
Tariffs.
Yeah.
Always tariffs. I mean, you know, we saw the deal coming out of Switzerland, 90-day stand down on the China-U.S. tariffs. So we go from 145 down to 30. China goes from 125 down to 10. Directionally, good news. It's fed this narrative that, you know, somehow Trump has changed his tune on tariffs. Not true. The U.S. effective tariff rate is now 16%, which puts us in the company of those economic powerhouses, Burundi, Chad, and Venezuela. So, no thanks.
Yeah. I mean, and this is just a 90-day pause on a lot of what he's talking about with China and things like that. So
there are no deals here.
We still have to get to a deal.
No deals.
At the end of this.
70 bad actors. We have no deals with any of them.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing doesn't hang together.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, as you know, I wrote a piece where I said we've done all this damage and we've gotten nothing.
Yeah.
I think that overstates the case, but that's life.
Yeah. and they did come to some agreement on the UK deal, but was it really an agreement?
Yeah. There's nothing written down, nothing signed. I can't tell if the Boeing planes were going to go there anyway, and they just rolled it into this to dress it up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when Mr. Trump was first elected president, he said we should get a real trade agreement with the then newly Brexited United Kingdom, you know, in a week, and we should have. We still need to do what USTR used to do as a matter of course, negotiate real trade agreements that lower barriers to trade and allow U.S. exporters market access. We made no progress on that front.
And what about what is this latest announcement? These announcements, these agreements, these planned, you know, these agreements to have agreements have impact on inflation and what the Fed might be thinking?
Well, we still have very substantial tariffs in place.
Mm-hmm.
We have a 10% universal tariff. We've got the Canada-Mexico ones, which are carved out to some extent. China still has a 30% tariff. That's not a zero. And we have all the products, steel, aluminum. So the Fed's going to be vigilant. And, you know, I think they should be. We got the CPI data, and everyone said, oh, what a relief. We got this soft month. So we're at 2.3 year over year on the CPI, but we're at 4.0 over the past 3 months. Same's true for the core. We're at 2.8 year over year, but we're at 3.7 for the past 3 months. So it's heating up. No way around that. And we're just getting into the data that's really going to reflect the tariffs being imposed.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So you think probably the Fed holds position for the rest of the year, or
no?
Or at least through the summer.
I think in June I had expected them to have to move. I just didn't know which direction.
Yeah.
Now I think they have the luxury of holding in June and making the decision at the next meeting. But by then, we're going to find out which is in bigger danger, the inflation mandate or the employment mandate, and they're going to have to make a move.
Interesting. Let's turn to another fun topic, of course, the reconciliation bill. It seems to have finally making its way to the big committees, the ones that we've been waiting for. Ways and Means held their marathon markup, and Energy and Commerce did as well. So let's start with Ways and Means, the tax portion of this. What's in and what's out?
Well, there's a permanent extension of the individual provisions and the pass-through provisions. That's something the Senate wanted a lot, but that chews up a lot of their allocation. They then have expensing of equipment investment, faster depreciation of some structures, expensing of R&D, and the interest deduction, but it's only for 4 years. So they've stacked it up against the 28 election. J.D. Vance can run, promising to get that extended. But that's not good growth policy. That's sort of playing political games with it. Those were the key pieces from a growth perspective. The rest are all no tax on tips, there's something in there for that. No tax on overtime, there's something in there for that. No tax on Social Security, they have an extra deduction for seniors. This is just political walking around money. It's not good growth policy. And so, it's the opposite of tax reform. We're creating all these sort of special provisions. And we're bringing back things we got rid of. We got rid of something that used to be called the PEASE, P-E-A-S-E provision, where you phase out itemized deductions for high-income people. When you do that, you essentially have a hidden extra marginal tax rate. That was viewed as bad tax policy. We got rid of it. It's back. We got rid of interest deductibility. It's back if you buy a domestic car. And think about what they're going to do now. This is why sort of neutral taxes are so important. Everybody's leasing their car. You don't get an interest deduction on a leased car. Now, the leasing market's going to fall apart. People are going to take out loans and buy cars. So here we go. And I'm not a fan. Yeah. Let's just put it that way. This is not a great piece of tax policy.
Yeah, I mean, and you didn't even bring up the SALT cap, which of course
it's still
Speaker Johnson is meeting with the SALT caucus later today or tomorrow, sometime in the near future, and also the Freedom Caucus people. So that's going to be has to be another portion of the tax portion of the reconciliation package.
This is just the most vivid example of the politics trumping good policy. I mean, there's no question about it. The SALT cap should be zero.
Yeah.
And they could then have the money to do all sorts of good tax policy.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of the conversation so far with the Ways and Means portion of this has been, what the political, like the tips, the tax on tips and stuff like that, the political promises that were made during the campaign, the pro-growth section. But what would have, and you wrote a little bit about this, you and back Brady. In the Representative Brady in the Wall Street Journal, what would have pro-growth policy looked like?
So, if the 17 Act was a tremendous simplification, this does a U-turn and makes the code more complicated in every dimension. It would have done permanence on the investment incentives, and that would have been the biggest thing they could have done. They could have also improved the taxation and pass-throughs. They didn't do anything other than just give it a bigger deduction, but they still have all the sort of differential tax rates that come from the individual brackets, right? You could have actually had a regime that was sensible for pass-through entities. They didn't do any of that. They could have fixed the international provisions better. There's not much there. This is just it's just using the tax code for targeted constituencies instead of worrying about the economy and growth.
Interesting. On the other side of this, of course, Energy and Commerce, and Michael will be on a little later to talk more in depth about this. But I wanted to sort of get your view on the portions of this part of the package. What's in and what's out there?
Well, the biggest things that are out are any substantial reforms to Medicaid. I mean, the number one thing would have been to roll back the expansion that came with the ACA. They covered single individuals, and we didn't 90% match rate, which doesn't make any sense. Why we have a higher match rate for single males than for pregnant mothers? I don't understand that at all. None of that's happening. Per capita caps, the reforms that were in the 17 law that didn't make it through. That got pitched out. They did put in some work requirements. That'll get all the attention. Those haven't historically done a lot. They went after these so-called provider taxes. So because the federal government matches state spending, if I tax Kyle $100 and then just spend that $100 right back in the Medicaid program, the federal government now matches it at say a 70% rate. I turned that $100 into $170. So that's just gaming the feds. Right? You're giving it to me, but I'm giving it right back. You're not any worse off. We're just taking the money from the other taxpayers. So they crack down on that. I think that's a good thing. There's going to be some yelping about it, but I think that's in the right direction.
Interesting. Well, Doug, that's all I had to talk today about. So thanks for joining us.
Happy to join.
Michael, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
You've had quite a busy week.
It has been. It's been good, but busy.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's no end in sight for you right now. So we just had Doug on to talk about the energy and commerce portion of the reconciliation package, and I want to get your take.
Absolutely. It's always a marathon to try to get through these packages, but it's an important piece of congressional action and presidential action, so it's important to pay attention to.
Yeah. So you've talked a lot about this whole package being, a missed opportunity for some real reform. What should lawmakers have focused on to ensure the long-term sustainability of these programs?
Yeah. So one of the big things that is really important is that we don't often, the collective group of people who care about federal health policy, don't very often get to take big swings at structural reforms in any program, let alone one that takes up such a large portion of the federal budget. And it's really, really important that we use this opportunity to do just that, not only to create sustainability, but also to make sure that the programs are working for the people that they need to work for.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm sure that you'll have to continue to watch all this as it unfolds and what the final package will look like as we continue moving on. But there was another big announcement in your area this week that sort of stole most of the headlines on Monday, and that's, of course, drug prices. President Trump signed an executive order aimed at lowering drug prices on Monday, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, so Monday. So what were the key takeaways from that executive order?
So the executive order on Monday set up a new policy regime that really focused on lowering drug prices in line with the rest of the world. It is well documented that Americans pay for drugs at much higher levels than in other countries, but that's not inherently a bad thing. And this executive order sort of sets it up that way. So what it does is it says that pharmaceutical companies have to sell their drugs to Americans at the same prices or lower prices to those abroad, particularly in the Organization for Economic and Cooperative Development, so OECD, which is a group of countries across Europe and South America, which brings up a concerning point, which is that's a price control. That's a price cap on what a company can charge, and that's really concerning because, first of all, we know that price caps don't work, but second of all, we are outsourcing America's considerable purchasing power and market strength to nations that probably don't have the same standard of living nor the same economic abilities that we do.
Interesting. So what kind of impact do you expect this kind of order will actually have?
So it's still a little early to say what exactly the impact will be because we do need some further guidance from various cabinet secretaries, including the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of Commerce, and the U.S. Trade Representative. But we would imagine that if price caps are brought to the United States, this will lessen innovation. This will deter development and the sale of various drugs, and really could harm the long-term health outlook for the United States, which I know has been an important measure of concern, particularly in the new administration. But this order does not actually help us solve that and could exacerbate the issues that we're facing.
Yeah, it seems like the past couple of administrations, whether it be the IRA or this latest order, have just obviously everyone wants to have cheaper drugs, but there's a lot of unintended consequences with some of these fixes that they're bringing along with them.
Yeah, the fixes themselves, which are exactly what they're billed as, are not fixes. They introduce whole new problems, and we end up creating a new thing to fix.
Yeah.
And if we obviously, there are a number of different factors, and this may be a gross oversimplification, but the market has done okay in health innovation and development, and I think that while there absolutely can and should be, again, to go back to the reconciliation conversation, structural reform in how the federal government engages in the healthcare system, I don't think that unilateral executive action and a pricing regime that obviously doesn't work in other countries that well is the answer to the problems that we're facing.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure that will create more headaches for you and more problems, but you'll have a lot more to say on this later and continuing as the plans start to unfold. But I have one last very important question for you. Who do you have winning the PGA Championship this weekend?
So I know there's a lot of discussion about Quail Hollow being a good fit for various golfers. Rory McIlroy, chief among them. I do think that he probably has been unburdened by what has been.
Yep.
And so I think he's a good bet because he's just going out there to swing for the sticks. But there's a lot of good news about Scotty, who I hope sort of gets back to the top of the game, because again, this is it's really interesting when you have multiple good golfers that are out there. But I have to go with Rory because I just think he fits the course that well.
I'm going to go with the second Grand Slam of the year with Jordan Spieth finally getting there.
That would be great. I would really enjoy that.
Michael, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Tune back in for our next episode, where our experts will provide clear, data-driven insights into today's economic and domestic issues. I'd also encourage you to check out any of the links in our show notes, and also follow us on social media to learn more about AAF. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play.